Hitchcock might be one of the more famous incidental Catholics in popular culture history. Although it may have been incidental, we can't dismiss any idea that it bore no influence upon his work. Having claimed in at least one interview that his first fear was of boarding school nuns, by all accounts an extremely terrifying prospect for younger students at one time, and anyone raised in the Catholic faith will tell you an awe-inspiring sense of the grandiosity of the Lord's cosmos is matched by an equally visceral sense of the misery, suffering, evil, and trauma of this mortal world. And then there is that other, even more frightening time-out room beyond it. Hitchcock's films may have been informed by an intrinsically Catholic disposition, a sense of the grand, a sense of an individual forming part of some higher schema, like a gear in a clock, and certainly that sense of repression, of submerged secrets, of a spectre of shame, at sheer terror at the judgment of the community. Perhaps certain Protestant sects were as horrifying as the largest church's creativity, travelling beyond a preconceived principle of sola scriptura it was. But compared with the milquetoast Anglicanism of other British subjects, the Catholic experience is an incredibly distinct one. The pathology of the Irish alone compared with the Protestant counterparts on the British Isles informs this very demonstrably. And Hitchcock's most Catholic film, possibly the only overtly Catholic text in his filmography, is 1953's I Confess, not often lauded as a major highlight of his 50s output, his most celebrated set, likely is not. I Confess displays outstanding black and white photography from the man Robert Burks, a stellar lead performance from Monty Clift, always fitting the right profile, and some of the more challenging, tense moral dilemmas of the Hitchcock oeuvre. As a script, I Confess is a touch convoluted, the drama existing for ends and for generally contrived tension, although in execution the players become radiant signifiers of subjects within a Catholic ontological continuum. The priest, a member of his flock who has committed a mortal sin, another layperson close to the mortal sinner who is in a crisis of conscience, and another layperson again who finds themselves in psychological reliance on the priest for a sense of emotional well-being and stability. And also the spectre of the state, of Caesar, in Carl Malden's Detective, a year prior to performing one of his most well-known parts as a Catholic priest in Kazan's timeless On the Waterfront. In Kazan's film, Malden's priest has no intention of breaking the seal of confession, but stridently motivates the criminals in question or accomplices to report the trespassers to the law, to the state. Monty Clift's much younger Catholic priest in Hitchcock's film is hesitant to even encourage the criminal in question to turn themselves into the authorities, and as a result is seemingly willing to be trialed as a martyr in order to uphold his seal of confession. Hitchcock's fascination with Catholic concerns imbues I Confess with an existential prowess and consistent watchability, and it extracts all the potential from the script, whilst not exactly protecting it from scrutiny once the experience of the film itself has concluded. One of Hitchcock's more underrated films, not one of the most major classics, but a stellar viewing experience, I feel, by anyone's standards. Apparently an influence on the French New Wave, according to Pete Bogdanovich, who did it better, Monty Clift or Jean-Paul Belmondo in Melville's film, or were both inferior to the Bresson star Claude Ledoux for 1951's Diary of a Country Priest. Mostly the Catholic priest is an older man when portrayed in films. At this time in history, it wasn't unfeasible that a younger man might still join the clergy, whereas a vast majority would presumably be older males. Now, I actually once considered joining the clergy at a lonely, uncertain point in my life, although the temptations that Clift's character leaves aside, and that which softly haunt him still whilst he diligently performs his role, were what led me away from that path, predictably. The Catholic Church itself as a subject is often very scorned and demonized nowadays for rather obvious reasons, although this had, without question, seemed so much more wicked somehow if that were possible due to the professed idealized nature of the Church. I can still believe in the potential of the Church to do good, think liberation theology, think a body of charitable aid workers motivated by the message of Christ and not by any allure of vanity, consider the magnificent existential, densely philosophic theology of the faith, and it has such a grand visceral philosophy of art in general. The more scornful dismissals of the Church are too reeking of smug for me to take seriously, and no righteous causes any scent of smugness. That is the most important lesson I've learnt when attempting to gauge who a genuinely good human being is or not, in my opinion. If you're willing to allow it, I Confess is very solid Hitchcock, maybe even an incredibly strong one, only appearing lesser compared to several of the greatest films of all time existing around its initial release date from the same filmmaker.